Tools of conquest do not necessarily come with bombs and explosions and fallout. There are weapons that are simply thoughts, attitudes, prejudices, to be found only in the minds of men. For the record, prejudices can kill, and suspicion can destroy, and a thoughtless, frightened search for a scapegoat has a fallout all of its own, for the children and the children yet unborn. And the pity of it is that these things cannot be confined to the Twilight Zone.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is quite a special kind of personal thing for me today because it's talking about something that I've been collecting for many years, many years, and something that means a lot to me. Probably some of my prized possessions I want to talk about. So you've probably clicked on the title and the thumbnail, you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, ever since starting this sort of booktube nature of the channel, because it was initially a music thing and now I've turned it into a booktube thing. Since doing that, a couple of years ago, I've wanted to do this. So it was just finding the right time and knowing how I wanted to do it. But I think I know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to go through and define what the Twilight Zone magazine was. And I'm going to go through, just quickly cover the ones I've got. I've got a lot of them. But basically, whenever I can, I get them, but they're quite rare. So if I see them on eBay and stuff, any copies I haven't got, then I can afford it, I snap it up. But I'm going to go through them. I'm going to talk about what was in them and why I think it's such a special magazine. And then later on, I'm going to review them like year by year. That's what I'm going to do afterwards. So through this year, I'll be taking them year by year. So it ran for 8 years. So it will be 8 videos. But actually, will it be 8 videos? Because there's still some of the early ones I need to collect. So I think some of the issues, because they're missing, then it might mean that some years are less detailed than other years. But we'll see how that goes. But in the meantime, that's what I'm doing. So the Twilight Zone magazine. If you guys know what the Twilight Zone is, that's awesome. Most people do, but not everyone will. And let's face it, it's an old program. There's been lots of different versions of it, and I will do a video just on Twilight Zone at some point because it means so much to me. But I am going to talk about the magazines specifically. But just a little bit of context. It was a show that was created by Rod Serling in the late 50s. It ran for 5 years, and it made a huge cultural impact. So it had a massive influence on TV at the time, but it did actually have a massive influence on fiction in general and writing, and it featured loads of debuts by actors that would then become really famous, and it had a few principal writers, but it also had people like Ray Bradbury contribute to the story, and obviously as well as Ray Bradbury, those 3 main writers did include Richard Matheson, who wrote tons of stories. So most of the stories in the original 5-season series were written by Rod Serling, who created the show. And he's the guy that presents it as well. So there's a very famous image that may be familiar to a lot of you of a man in a black suit with a cigarette talking to the camera, introducing the story, and then coming on at the end and making a kind of conclusion, a kind of like a lesson learned from the story kind of idea. Sometimes it wasn't a lesson learnt. Sometimes it was just, that was crazy, wasn't it? Well, that's the Twilight Zone for you. Sometimes it would just be that kind of speech, but it was very poetic and brilliantly written. So Rod Serling would do those bits, and he wrote most of the episodes. But then going down, the next most prolific author of those 5 seasons was Richard Matheson. So Richard Matheson obviously wrote I Am Legend and The Shrinking Man and tons and tons of short stories. Really influential, and Hell House, obviously. A really influential author. But what he wrote for the Twilight Zone is also some of his best work as well. Amazing episodes. And George Clayton Johnson also wrote some great episodes, and as did Charles Beaumont as well. So Charles Beaumont was a bit of an interesting character, bit of an interesting personality, quite troubled, I think, and some of his writing was quite dark. But Yeah, that was the original five season series, and there was another long running series in the 80s when it was revived by J. Michael Straczynski, and that was an interesting. That had some great episodes as well, and it was an interesting development because you had Harlan Ellison as a creative consultant on that, and you had loads of stories, some written by Harlan Ellison, but there was lots of other stories that were written by really important writers and directors like Wes Craven and Joe Dante, and all sorts of different great directors got involved in that as well, because by then Twilight Zone had become a big cultural thing. So the 80s series did have some really good things about it, some great episodes, and there's actually a really good Richard Matheson story in that called Button Button. Is it called Button Button? I think it's called Button Button. The story's called Button Button. I think the episode's called that. They did a awful film where they just expanded the plot into a bizarre rabbit hole because they wanted to make it feature length. But if you do catch the 80s Twilight Zone episode called Button Button, then that's an amazing episode. One of the best Twilight Zone episodes, I think, and that's written by Richard Matheson. It's brilliant. A kind of similar dilemma, superstitious thing that you get in Nick of Time, which he wrote, which William Shatner was in. William Shatner was in two of the Richard Matheson stories in the original series. He was in Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, which is a really famous one that was remade in the movie, and Nick of Time, which is another really, really good one. And William Shatner's acting is really good in Nick of Time. Anyway, I'll talk about the show another time. So the point is, the Twilight Zone was a big deal. There was another series that they've done since then with Jordan Peele presenting it, doing the kind of the Rod Serling character at the beginning. And I quite like that series. It's definitely very modern, and there's definitely a lot of politics in it, which turns some people off. But I think it's been done really well. I mean, one of the best episodes, I think, of the new lot is the one called Replay, about a black guy who gets murdered by a policeman, and the whole plot of that episode is his mum trying to rewind time, and every single way she tries to do it, to replay that bit of their life again, it always ends with her son dying, and it's really well done, because it's almost like, well, it is saying, you know, the system is rigged for this to happen, and it's just really well done. So yeah. Some of the political stuff, because there was some political stuff in the original series as well. Again, I'll talk about the series in another video, but in the meantime, let's look at these magazines, and I'll tell you about what you would often find in them. So, the magazine started in early 1981. So in 1981, they started publishing the Twilight Zone magazine, and the editor was T.E.D. Klein, who already was a famous writer, and it was it had kind of a format. There was pretty much the format of the whole magazine in this whole run. There was a different editor halfway through the run, but it stayed true to what it was right from the beginning. And you'd often get like an editorial note at the beginning from Carol Serling, which is who's the widow of Rod Serling. So she'd always write something in each issue. And there was always a bit at the beginning saying what was in the issue, and then it would obviously have the content after that. So it started in 1981 and it ran until June 1989. So for 8 years, you had this, I think, quite a special magazine. How often it came out was a bit odd, because it was kind of monthly when it first started, and then it was a little bit random, and then it became bi-monthly. So by the time I discovered it, because of most of the issues I've bought retrospectively, but by the time I was buying it, it was bi-monthly. So every 2 months, there was one shop in my city, in Portsmouth. There was one shop that sold it, and I'd go down there and you know, excitedly buy this new issue that come out of the Twilight Zone magazine. In those days, I was buying loads of magazines. I was buying Q, Mojo, Empire, Sight and Sound. I was buying loads of magazines. I loved magazines. But yeah, the Twilight Zone magazine was a really big deal. So interestingly enough, in 1983, I found this out when I was just double checking when it started. In 1983, the Twilight Zone magazine actually outsold Analog magazine. So clearly it did have a lot of success for a while, but it stopped running in 1989. So that was a little bit of a shame. So it wasn't a long run, only 8 years. But let's talk about what was in it. I think the only way to do this coherently is to go through the covers quickly and then talk about the things that you would often find in the actual content of the book, of the magazine. Because if I just look at one in detail, it'll cover a lot of ground and it'll just be like ignoring all the others. So I'm just going to go through it really quickly, and I'll try not to double up. If I remember I've been through one of the covers, I'll try not to double up. That's Rod Serling himself, and this is one of the issues. And this is December 1988 December. So you've got quite a lot about Rod Serling himself in that issue, and you've got the names of the authors there that would be featured as in their original fiction featured. You've got, so quite often they had these fantastic covers, so I'll talk about that in a minute. We've got an interview with David Lynch there, David Show's new story there. That's the October 88 one. Got Whitley Strieber being featured here, as well as some stuff about H.R. Geiger, which is awesome. It says 7th anniversary issue there, and another one from 1988, that's April 1988. Graham Masterton is one of the authors there. Anne Rice featured here, a new kind of sequel to Interview with a Vampire written by Anne Rice. Rod Serling's Battle with the Censors, so sometimes it was some featured stuff there. And you got something about Joe Dante's Explorers, which is a great film. I don't know if you guys have seen Explorers, a great film. Another evocative cover there for this one, Angel Fire, written by Andrew Greeley. And then you've got 7 other stories here, Scott. So you've got 8 stories in this one. You've got The Serpent and Rainbow being featured there. And you've got stuff about Willow, George Lucas's latest film at the time. Another one from 1988, this one. First of many appearances from Stephen King. So there's a new story from him, there's an interview, and some stuff about a new film that is based on his stuff. Is a Stephen King special, which is what they're stressing there. So this came from February 86, that one. So that was from February 86. This one, I remember getting this one in the shop, so this is definitely by the time I was getting it. Some of those other ones I got in the shop as well. But I remember seeing that cover, I think it was just really awesome. So Piers Anthony and Raymond Feist featured here. And there's an article by Gene Wolfe on fantasy. And I've heard a lot about him lately because it seems like everybody is reviewing Shadow of the Torture at the moment. And yeah, the names here of some of the authors that have been featured for new fiction being featured. It's from December 87, this one. And there's a feature on Clive Barker's Hellraiser, right? And a little thing there, the truth about vampires and werewolves. This is another cover that features Rod Serling, but another anniversary one as well. And this one has lots about the Night Gallery, which was like a sister show to the Twilight Zone. So that's really awesome. There would have been loads of stories in this as well, but they haven't put those on the front cover. New story by Roger Zelazny. Also more stuff about Night Gallery. A new story, or not a new story, but a story by Algernon Blackwood featured as well. And a really evocative cover again. And this is from June 85. So this is from June 85 as well. Some of them I've bought with covers. I'm not going to take them out of the covers for now. This is some stuff about the new film of the Twilight Zone that's coming out. So there has been a film in the 80s, which is the Twilight Zone movie, which I will probably talk about when I talk about the show, which is, I think it's a really good film. It has its faults, but it's a really good film. It's quite underrated, I think. And you've got something about Lovecraft here as well, H.P. Lovecraft. And this is from August 1983, this one. And you've got a really cool issue here from June 88, with Richard Matheson and Richard Christian Matheson. So there's interviews with both of them and original work by them as well. And also some stuff about Big Trouble in Little China. John Carpenter's film Big Trouble in Little China. And a story by Ramsey Campbell. He features a few times in this. And something from Rockney S. O'Bannon, which is kind of interesting. Rockney S. O'Bannon featured there. Okay. This one I've already featured. This is one of my doubles. This one has an interview with Robert Bloch. So this is an older one. This is from June '81. So this is the first year that it was coming out. So this is the one from June. So this is one I've bought online, second hand, when I've been able to find it. But Theodore Sturgeon doing book reviews. That's awesome, isn't it? And you've got a special feature on fantasy illustration, and a new piece of work from Stephen King. This one is from February '87. It's another one of my favourite ones. This has got Harlan Ellison story in it, as well as Charles L. Grant and Jane Williamson's writing as well. And it's kind of like a review of 1986 as well. So this is a really good issue. Another fantastic cover there from the Twilight Zone. Many new stories, including a new story from Richard Christian Matheson, Richard Matheson's son. And that's from February 1988. Another great cover. More from Richard Matheson. And another kind of yearly review of fantasy in that year. So that was from 1989, April 1989. So this is the last year it was publishing. I love these covers. Look at that cover. How cool is that? That is one of the iconic images I have from my childhood. I'll never forget. I say childhood. I was a teenager, but you know what I mean. June 1989. So something featured from George Clayton Johnson there, and Charles Beaumont, and as well as loads of new stories and all that kind of thing. Another interesting kind of cyberpunky kind of cover. Frederick Pohl featured here, and Peter Straub, and more about the Night Gallery. So that's what's being featured there on the cover from February 1989. This one, a special feature on the Gremlins, and some stuff there about To Serve Man, which is one of the best Twilight Zone episodes, and a new story by Ray Bradbury, which is pretty awesome. And this is from October 1984. 1984, going right back to 1984 in that one. Somewhere I've got a better copy of this one, but it's like the spine's gone. But new story from Robert M. McCammon there, and Joyce Carol Oates, and lots of other stories there. A feature on American Indian magic, which is kind of interesting, and then you've got stuff about Spaceballs. And that was August 1987, that one. Another beautiful cover. I don't know if you guys have heard of the Twilight Zone magazine, but it's quite awesome, isn't it? This is from April 1986, and this is Peter Straub and Ramsey Campbell's interviews there, as well as new writing from Charles L. Grant again, Richard Christian Matheson, and a little feature on some of the new fantasy shows that were appearing on TV at the time. And they often had these sort of contests for new fiction, and then they published the winners in the issues as well. This one has interviews with Burgess Meredith, and interviews with Scott Glenn and Kate Capshaw, and more from Richard Matheson, and this is from April 1994. And a thing about Dreamscape as well, the film. So this cover is from, can't even see that with all the cellophane, I should probably take it out. This is, the picture is from Star Trek 3, So there's a feature on Star Trek 3, and an interview with Leonard Nimoy and Harrison Ford, and there's a feature on Firestarter, and some more stuff about the Rod Serling stories, and more original stories, obviously. But this is from 1984 as well. Another great cover. So Frederick Pohl is talking about biofeatures. There's an article from Frederick Pohl, and also an article from Greg Bear, and this is the cover is a reference to Jim Burns, who's featured as a like an article about his artwork as well, and that's from October 1987. There's a new feature on J.G. Ballard in this one, as well as lots of new stories, and a story from Robert M. McCammon, and an interview with Stephen King where he talks about My Stranger's Letters. Can you see that? Which is quite awesome. So again, that's from 1988 as well. Halloween issue, and Dean Koontz has a story in this one. Another interview with Stephen King, and there's a film that came out at the time called Trick or Treat, and there's a sort of feature about that film as well. So a special Halloween issue for that particular time, which is December 1986. This is a feature with Stephen King and Peter Straub talking about how they wrote The Talisman. So that's a really awesome addition to the magazine. And there's a special 1985 calendar from Gain Wilson. Gain Wilson features a lot in this magazine, but I haven't mentioned why yet, because I'll talk about that in a second. But Gain Wilson is one of my favourite cartoonists and people, so that's quite cool. And then 10 new stories in this issue. April 1987. This was one of the first ones I bought myself at the time, so I don't know if it was the very first. I can't really work it out, but I do remember that this was a really important moment. It might have been the second, because in some ways, if I'd already bought one, I couldn't wait to see it, and then it could have been that. But it was either the first or second that I bought. Ramsey Campbell featured, and Charles L. Grant, and a special feature on voodoo, and its origins, and the sort of social context of voodoo, and more, more about the religion, and another anniversary issue. So it's kind of going a little bit back on what has already been in there as well, and some more awesome new fiction as well. So that's from April 1987. You've got Edgar Allan Poe and Robert Bloch story The Lighthouse. You've got some features on E.T. and Tron. And this is from 1982, so this is from August 1982, so one of the early ones. Special issue in October 1983 on the film, Twilight Zone the movie. So loads and loads of stuff about the making of the film in that one. Really, really awesome film, I think. And yeah, the whole issue is about the film, really. With some of its features still there, like the book reviews and that. And Robert Silverberg story there in this one, and also Stephen King reviewing The Boogans, and a special thing in the magazine about The Thing, and yeah, lots of good stuff there. And this one's from July 1982. This one is from March 1982 and features an interview with Fritz Lieber. So that's pretty unusual. And more about The Thing, John Carpenter's Thing, and loads of news, 9 new fiction stories. There's a feature, there's an actual script of Rod Serling's story, Passage for Trumpet. That features a lot. It's one of the things I'll talk about when I talk about the general content. And a feature about a new film called Stab, which had Meryl Streep in it and Roy Scheider. So that's that one. Peter Straub, The General's Wife, another new story from Peter Straub, as well as inclusions from Stephen King, Rod Serling, and Gain Wilson as normal. And an interview with Terry Gilliam there as well. So that's pretty awesome. Oh, and a feature on Dark Crystal. So loads in this one. And this one, a story by Charles Beaumont. And this is from December 1982. So stuff about the film Extro, which was a big thing at the time. Yeah, more fiction, including a story by Pamela Sargent. This one is from June 1987. It's got a story by Clive Barker on it, and a feature on the Witches of Eastwick, a story from John Updike, and a kind of an exploration of witchcraft in general in this one. It's kind of a theme in the issue, so I don't know if you can see that, yeah, that's its general theme. Well, this one goes back a bit. This is back to 1981. So this is September 1981. So interviews with Richard Matheson and a special preview of a new comic called Roderick, The Education of a Young Machine. Don't know what that was. The script of Time Enough at Last, which is one of the best things ever. And something about The Howling. Oh no, it's a new story from Gary Brandner, who wrote The Howling, as well as all the other regular features. So that was from 1981. Another thing here about Stephen King, so this is him talking about the Dead Zone, and the Dead Zone just come out at this point, so there's a fair bit about the Dead Zone in that one. Can you see that? As well as obviously the new stories. And this comes from December 1983. There's a feature on The Outer Limits as well, which was kind of like the rival to the Twilight Zone at the time. I've got a better copy there. This is from February 1984, and it's got a feature on Christine, Stephen King's film Christine, as well as like a review of the best fantasy films, and obviously there's Princess Leia there, so that would have been Return of the Jedi, and something about the Outer Limits again, so they were kind of going back on the old Outer Limits program, and a feature on John Carpenter's fiction as well. Not even at the end yet. October 1981. More stuff. Richard Matheson does an analysis of films relating to Edgar Allan Poe, which is pretty cool. And there's a story from George Clayton Johnson. He wrote for the original Twilight Zone series. There's a story from Robert Sheckley in here, and again, like this, it just cracks me up. Theodore Sturgeon was a book reviewer in it. Amazing. So that was that one. Another one from the same period. This is from December 1981, and you've got. This is a great title for this interview. It's got Fighting Back and Other Pleasures, an impolite interview with Harlan Ellison. Very typical kind of Harlan Ellison content there. And it's got stuff about the scripts for the Twilight Zone, and a thing about a new film at the time called Handyman, a new horror film, and a new story by John Lonsdale, as well as all the other stories. There's like another 8 stories in there that I hadn't mentioned. This is a new interview with Wes Craven. This is in the February 82 one, and there's stuff from Robert Sheckley again and Gain Wilson as normal. Special feature on Swamp Thing, looking at that kind of thing as a sort of thematic thing in that one. Well, this one is a bit knackered, and I've got a better copy there that I've kept in the thing because that's so knackered. So I'll just refer that to this one. This has got news stories from Robert M. McCammon, as well as news story from Robert and Jay Sheckley, his wife. And it's got an interview with T.A. Klein. And it's got a special feature on on David Cronenberg's The Fly, which you may have seen me say before. I think that's a masterpiece, that film. So a thing about The Fly there in this issue. And this issue comes from October 1986. It's got news stories from Robert Silverberg and an interview with Whit Stryber again. Interesting cover, that one. Double up. So a long lost radio script from Rod Serling in this one. This is from September 1982. A feature, a special section on Arthur Machen and his particular brand of fantasy horror. And he got an interview with Paul Schrader on Cat People. And you've got a special preview of Creepshow as well, which, again, I think that's an underrated film. I love that film. And oh, and also there's a feature on Something Wicked This Way Comes, which was a great adaptation of the book that had Jonathan Pryce as Mr. Dark and Jason Robards in it as well. A really good film. It was a Disney film, wasn't it? You guys probably know that already. And this is from April 1982. An actual interview with Rod Serling there, a lost interview with Rod Serling. A story from George Alec Effinger. More new fiction from Harlan Ellison and Ramsey Campbell. More on the Cat People. So this is like a first anniversary issue. This one. This was from December. Doesn't say the year. But this has got interviews with Stephen King and Harlan Ellison and Phil DeGuerre. So that would have been relating to the series of the Twilight Zone that had just come out, because Phil DeGuerre was the producer with J. Michael Straczynski. So this would have been a special feature on the new series of the Twilight Zone, which was really good. Another double up. I'm almost at the end. This is a special. This is from January 1982, and this is loads of stuff written on the cover. So this is a new story from Connie Willis. So I know Connie Willis now, but at the time I wouldn't have known Connie Willis. And lots of new stories here. Lots of people mentioned another story from Robert Sheckley, and a feature on Lovecraft. So all of these things in this issue. And this is January 1982. Two left. This one has a cover from Gahan Wilson. So Gahan Wilson does actually contribute to every single issue of this, but that's his artwork. So very unmistakable style of Gahan Wilson. And he's talking about H.P. Lovecraft in this issue. But there's also Mad Max 3 preview, and as usual, lots of new fiction. Like there's normally about between 8 and 10 new short stories in all of these issues. And last one, this is, I'll take this out of the thing. And the last one is from April 1983, and this one has got a preview of The Hunger, which was the really cool and quite unusual sort of art house vampire film that David Bowie was in. And an interview with Colin Wilson. That was probably because Life Force was coming out. And more stuff from Richard Matheson. And some stuff about the contest they were doing. And a review of the year. So, yeah, that's those issues. That's the issues I've got with a few doubles, but I've still got a few holes, some other things to get. So it's not a complete collection yet, but it's like that's my holy grail to try and complete the collection. So yeah. So as you'd expect from a magazine with lots of short stories in it, there's lots of elements of just simply prose with a cool illustration for each story, and they sort of obviously go off into different pages. So it kind of dominates the book. The short fiction dominates the magazine. The book dominates the magazine. But in between all of that, so this is just one issue. But in between all of that, you've got certain regular features I mean, this is the last one that I mentioned, which has got the feature on the hunger. So usually they have interviews with the director or the writer, or sometimes some of the cast, but usually it's the director they're interviewing. And then this one has a feature on Connor Wilson. So again, usually quite a good, in-depth and interesting interview that they do with whoever it is they're talking to. And then there's a few other special features. So at this point, Thomas Dish is reviewing the books, so these book reviews. Looks like there's a different seasons review there. That's kind of interesting. And certainly in the early years, as I was pointing out, you've got book reviews from Theodore Sturgeon, which I just think is awesome. You also had regular film reviews from Gahan Wilson, so that was a constant thing in the magazine. So just so this is one of the examples of Gahan Wilson talking about the cinema that was out at the time. So that's clearly 1984. Sometimes the artwork for the stories was really interesting, as well as the stories themselves. But I'm going to go through all that later in another video. But you also had these cartoons that would appear. And it was thanks to the Twilight Zone that I discovered Tom Chaney, who is actually a cartoonist that appeared in New Yorker as well. But I just think he's brilliant. So this is an example of a Chaney cartoon. And if I see any others as I'm just going through them, I will put them up. But yeah, Tom Chaney is a brilliant, brilliant cartoonist. There's a special feature on Willow in this one. So you've got original artwork from the film here. And obviously your normal pages devoted to fiction. What an awesome illustration that is for that story. See here, look, there's a book review bit from Robert Sheckley. That's awesome for me because I'm a big Robert Sheckley fan, and the fact that he did these regular book reviews is just brilliant. This final major interview with Rod Serling there. So it's quite a long and interesting interview. It goes, for a few pages. That's really cool. And there's quite a lot, obviously, because it's Twilight Zone, there's lots of things that are themed to the Twilight Zone throughout the whole thing. This is a story by Harlan Ellison. So this story by Harlan Ellison is called Gin No Chaser. Definitely one I'm looking forward to reading again. So I think it's quite magical, really, but maybe it's just being too sentimental about it. And what is happening throughout the whole run is a show-by-show guide to the Twilight Zone, so episode guide. So that's running through it as well. And that guide is done by Mark Scott Zicree, who's also got his own channel, Mr. Sci-Fi, I think it's called. And he ended up writing the Companion, the Twilight Zone Companion, which is an amazing book, which I've mentioned before, and I will mention it again when I talk about the show in more detail. But he does do these regular breakdowns of the show. This research he did for this is probably what resulted in the Companion, to be fair. So, yeah, I mean, I've probably covered a lot of what you get. I mean, because it's also this idea that in this one, they talked about the context of voodoo and its sort of its place in society. Awesome. But that is one of the other things that happens in all the features that they have, all the magazines that have these features where they talk about a particular subject that's connected to fantasy or horror. And obviousvoodoo is something that gets used a lot in those kind of things. I'll always remember some of these pictures. That is such an awesome illustration, isn't it? And this is one of my favourite Cheney cartoons as well. Conversation with Ramsey Campbell on one side, conversation with Charles O. Grant. So I know lots of people absolutely love Ramsey Campbell. I remember really loving J.K. Potter's artwork, and he gets featured a few times. There was a special. There's an issue where they talk in great detail about that. Illuminations is a frequent feature in the magazine where it talks about new kind of things coming out in film and stuff like that, and some of the news basically. That's kind of like what their version of the news is. Oh, and there's a letters page. Clearly someone had written something about Hal Nelson there. And there's the note from Carol Serling. You often got other things as well. So there'd be certain discourses that would happen. So this is one on nostalgia. Ron Goulet just talks about nostalgia and how that features into film and literature, and that covers quite a number of pages because it's a really interesting article there. There's even a teaser quiz there, a movie quiz, and then here you've got an actual feature on music reviews as well. So even new CDs coming out, they would have featured that as well. So there's all sorts of things in this issue. This is issue with an interview with Clive Barker, which I think I probably mentioned when I went through the covers. An article about faith healing. So, all of these things are discussed in this, as well as your normal film reviews and fiction and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's the Twilight Zone magazine. Still got a few to get, but I just think they're amazing for all those different reasons. If you have never heard of it and you think it's quite interesting, then it could be something you might want to start hunting for yourself. Or if you think if you've got some, then get them out and read them again. But yeah, it's a fascinating thing. The Twilight Zone has produced lots of different things besides the magazine, obviously, and there's been lots of descendants of Twilight Zone as well, like the most obvious one being Black Mirror. But these things need to go back in their safe place. Thanks a lot. Hope you enjoyed that. Bye.
Picture of what it's like to be you. You sit up on your high chair